Today we're doing factoring and solving polynomial functions, so we're going to look at different techniques for factoring when we have something bigger than a quadratic. Alright, your homework, this is assignment 3. Assignment number 3 for homework. Alright, so the first thing we're going to look at is what's called the sum of two cubes or the difference of two cubes. So this is a formula, I'll give you a second to write down, that you need to know. Okay, you're not going to be given this. So when you have two cubes, a cubed plus b cubed, the sum of two cubes, you get a plus b, a squared minus ab plus b squared. Okay, notice that these two signs are the same. This one matches up with this one, whereas this here is the opposite of the sum. Okay, the difference of two cubes, you get a cubed minus b cubed. So that's the difference of two cubes. And you get a minus b. Again, this sign is the same as this one. A squared plus ab plus b squared. And here's some examples over here, and we'll walk through this one. Alright, so let's look at this example. What is the cube root of 125 x cubed? 5x. Good. So we have 5x. What's the cube root of 64? 4. So that's the first thing you need to do, is make sure that it is, in fact, the sum of two cubes or the difference of two cubes. Once you do that, you just need to plug it in to the sum of two cubes formula. So you get 5x plus 4. Whoops, I already have that. And then we have a squared, so 25x squared, minus ab. So ab is 20x, so minus 20x plus 4 squared. Plus b squared, so plus 16. And then from here you would want to look and see if you can easily factor this second part. Sometimes you'll be able to factor this quadratic pretty easily. This one doesn't work quite well. It's not a perfect square trinomial. So you would have to do the AC method, see if that worked. But since it's not simple, we can just leave it as this, and then we'd be done. Alright, so we're next going to look at factor by grouping. Don't worry about getting this down. We're going to do factor by grouping when you have 4 terms. Okay? It's just like factor by grouping that we've done before. So you're given 4 terms. You're going to group it, the first 2 terms together, and the second 2 terms together. And then we're going to go through the same process that we've done before. So we want to see, okay, what's the greatest common factor of the first part? Right, 3x. Yep, 3x squared. And you get x plus 2. Okay, now remember, we want to factor out something from this second part that's going to give me the same factor as here. So what can I factor out of the second part? Negative 10, good. And that'll give me x plus 2. So remember, this is my one factor, 3x squared minus 10. And this is my other factor, x plus 2. Again, we check and see if either of these can be simplified further, which they cannot. Okay? And so then we're done. If we wanted to solve for this, you would just set each of those equal to 0 and solve for x. The next thing we're going to look at is what I like to call the quadratic on steroids. Okay? The quadratic on steroids. So first, we look at this. We notice we have a 6, a 4, and a 2. So that's the same pattern as 2, 1, 0. But before we do that, before we even look at that, we can simplify this by factoring something out. Right, I can factor out a 4. What else? X squared. Good. So I'm left with x to the 4th minus 5x squared plus 6. Okay? Yes, sir. So now, if we look at this structure here, this is the quadratic on steroids. It goes 4, 2, 0. Okay, so if we were to look at this, you'd have x squared, that equals x to the 4th, right? Minus 5x squared, x squared in parentheses plus 6. So if you think of x squared as just x, this is a quadratic. And we're going to factor it as if it were a quadratic. All right, so from here, we're just going to do the ACB method. So you know you need to multiply to 6 and add up to negative 5. So what are two values that multiply to 6 and add up to negative 5? Negative 2 and negative 3. Good. So then you'd get 4x squared. Now instead of x minus 3 and x minus 2, you'd have x squared minus 3 and x squared minus 2. Okay, we look in here to see if anything can factor more. It cannot. So this here would be your final answer for in factored form. So why don't you guys try this one? Here you want to solve. Okay? So solve for x. Give it your best shot. So the first thing you want to do with this problem is factor out a 3. Okay? Here you can divide by 3 because you are solving. So when you're solving, you can divide. So you have x to the 4th plus 5x squared minus 24 equals 0. And this we need to notice is that structure where it's just like the quadratic on steroids because it's being squared. So again, we're going to do the ACB method. So AC is negative 24. B is 5. So we want two things that multiply to negative 24 and add up to 5. And Mihal said 8 and negative 3. Good. So now I have x squared plus 8 and x squared minus 3. And this is set equal to 0. So to solve, all you would do is set each of these separately equal to 0. So now we would just set each of these separately equal to 0. So x plus 8, x squared plus 8 equals 0. X squared equals negative 8. You just take the square root. X equals plus or minus the square root of negative 8. What do we have to do here? Take out an I. We can also make it 2i. 8, square root of 8 is just 2 root 2. We're also going to set this equal to 0. So x squared equals 3. We take the square root. X equals plus or minus root 3. So your solutions are all of these 4. Okay? So those are your zeros, your solutions. We've solved for x.